So today we have a list, a distinguished guest of our panelists who's going to talk about, something more to our hearts, right? In Singapore, primarily in ASEAN, how they see the region. So all of us are local. So feel free to post your questions inside the pigeonhole. The instructions are here, and you can see other questions as well. We turn on anonymous posting, so feel free to post the questions anonymously. Nobody will know it's you. All right, so let's get started. Maybe a brief introduction of the guests here. So, how many of you are involved in an IT industry? Quite a few. And how many software engineers? No software engineers. What about people in as in IT, support, right? Supporting organizations in IT and DevOps. Okay. How many consultants? Quite a few. And how many people are more of a kind of business manager, line of business, right? You're running sales or okay, so more people. So now you know the audience. Now it's time to know our panelists. Let's start off with, why don't we start off with Mark? Give us a brief introduction of yourself and share with us who you are.
Well, I think I'm the only person wearing a tie here today, so that was obviously a big mistake. So my name's Mark Rajah. I work for Cooper. And we heard a little bit from Cooper at the beginning of the session from our guys in San Mateo. And Cooper is a cloud platform for business spend management. So what does that really mean? Well, if you think of the same way that Salesforce manages the prospect to cash process in the cloud for organizations. You think of the way that Workday manages all the human capital management from recruit through exit processes of an organization. So Cooper is really aimed at managing the source to contract and procure to pay processes in an organization in the cloud. So why do it in the cloud and do it outside of ERP? Well, the same reason you use Workday for HR and Salesforce for managing your pipeline of revenue. It's because it offers a much better user experience, it's more efficient, and it's more easily linked to actually measuring success metrics, i.e. making sure that the processes are governed and run in a good way. And I think Hans mentioned it in the beginning of his section that Cooper positions itself as a value as a service provider. So why value? My job title is Senior Value Solutions Consultant. I don't think it really means much, but you've got to sort of put it into context, right? So if you think of procurement and value, everyone just thinks about cost, driving down cost, and that's not really what it's all about, although it's part of it. If I'm a user of a procurement system, let's say I'm in the healthcare business. My primary goal is to give patient care to my patients, right? If I have to spend 2 hours raising a requisition in an antiquated system to buy beakers or syringes, that's one, a bad use of my time because I could be focused on my healthcare operation, and two, it's going to piss me off as an employee of that company that I have to work with that sort of antiquated old system. So user experience is very important. I just need to be able to get in, find what I need to do my job and get out again and have that stuff delivered to me when I need it, right? So, and with minimum investments in training. So that's the value to me as a user. If I'm a manager of, I've got to make sure my people are getting what they need to do their job and those things are being approved in a timely manner and that the budget's managed in a proper way. That's the value to the manager. If I'm in finance, I want to make sure that the invoices coming in from my suppliers are accurate, that they're what I ordered in the first place, that everything checks out from a compliance perspective. And if I'm the supplier, I want to make sure that I could very easily send invoices for the goods and services that I've shipped through electronic means, that I'm not going to get charged for that, for using another system, etc., etc., etc. So there's value that I can build my wallet share and then find new buyers to work with through a system. So there's value at all touch points along the line. So that's really a summary of what Cooper delivers.
Thank you, Mark. The next person that we have is Bing. Bing is the Managing Director for Accenture Cloud First. So Bing, tell us a little bit more about what Cloud First is, in Accenture, what does it mean?
Sure. So in Accenture, what I do every day is work with my clients to help them adopt a cloud-first approach in terms of building their application landscape or renew their application landscape. As Mark mentioned, a couple of them are native-born, what I call cloud applications, such as Salesforce, Workday, Cooper, Anaplan. And what we do is actually string a lot of them and help our clients on the journey to change their IT landscape, right? As they go and adopt what we call the digital transformation. So many a times when they go through that transformation, they would have to reconsider what else they would add, what else they want to retire from the applications, and that's how we take them on that journey. So that's what I do every day.
Thank you, Bing. Next person, we have Leon from Pigeon Lab, the tool that you're using today. So Leon, tell us a little bit more about what you do.
Hi, I'm essentially the product owner in the company. We are actually a startup company. We are based at Block 79. So I take care of the product teams. So I spend a lot of time iterating and thinking about how, as a product, we want to improve. So we talked a lot about with our customers, and then also analyze the competitive landscape and so on. So as a software, as a product, we actually work a lot with businesses, companies, for their internal meetings and their events. So a lot of companies use Visual Life to drive conversations internally. So imagine you're working in a bank and maybe you're a junior employee. Sometimes there's a social stigma where you don't want to kind of raise certain concerns to the management. So the platform enables the management to have these kind of conversations with their entire organization. So that's kind of what we do at Future Lab.
Thank you, Leon. The last person in our panelists is Kevin. So Kevin is from NUS Enterprise. He's a program director there, as well as Director of Business Development of their Smart System Institute. Kevin, share with us more about what you do.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for inviting me. Working in NUS Enterprise, actually I was from the corporate before, HP Hewlett-Packard. So we do a lot with, of course, system integration projects with the likes of Crescent and also the equipment companies that are complementing our the data houses. Now everything is on cloud, right? So yeah, so back to NUS, I handle a lot of the corporate partnerships. So as of late, especially the last few years, we see that corporate are in a good urgency mode, looking at how our startup community, like Pigeon Lab, can be integrated to this whole digital journey that they are crafting for themselves as well as their clients. So one example, the latest one that we have done is with Singapore Airlines. So after 3 years of working with them on a hackathon that first identify the students' projects that would disrupt their business in a positive way. We have actually gone through 3 years of such a journey with them, and this year they announced that they will have this digital innovation lab siting at the training center of Singapore Airlines, and that's very appropriate because that's where a lot of their new staffs train, not just the stewards, stewardess, but also the IT department that's having this whole effort is working with us to check out a possible pipeline from the students, from startups, and this pipeline of IT innovations is something that's new to a lot more other companies that have been talking to NUS Enterprise, because they feel that typically when you talk a vendor, it's something off the shelf and they will just tweet a bit and say this is the price, when are you issuing a PO to me, right? However, as of late, you see that startups can just come in and do something very different to disrupt them, because there's so much open innovations happening today, right? I mean, the stuff that Workato is doing is also something that would have been very new to them. Only recently they started to accept you, right? So, but there are gaps that we see. There's innovation and there's a need, but then in between, there's this period of settling down of that solution. So whether you do prototyping to give them a peace of mind that you are the right party as a new player or new chip on the block to work with them, is something that I think we could sort of iron out the king, and as a community builder, not just an academia organization in Singapore as NUS, we hope to play a more active role, right? So that's what I do on a daily basis.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you for all the panelists for joining us today. So today, we want to talk about intelligent automation, right, and what that means in the space of an IT operation context, right? So let's first talk about what intelligent automation is all about, right? So I have a quote here from Gartner. So Gartner defines intelligent automation as the strategies, skills, tools, and techniques that service providers are using to remove the need for labor, right? So less labor, increase predictability, right? Some of the panels that talked about previously, how can we increase predictability in what we do, and reliability of services while still reducing the cost of delivery, right? So it's kind of doing more with a lot less, right? So Didi Miresh, one of the research director at Gartner, said intelligent automation will alter the provision of managed workplace services over the next few years, increasing service quality at a lower price, right? So first off, let's go to Mark, and can you talk a little bit more about what Coupa is doing and how it has changed the landscape in terms of the procurement systems that you sell?
Okay.
Hello?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, it's going to be debated for years, isn't it? I mean, robotic process automation has been around for a while, artificial intelligence, machine learning coming in. As we said in the panel earlier, they were talking about whether AI and ML are going to replace jobs or actually create new jobs in their place. I think that debate will still rage for a while, but just think of some practical applications. Essentially, you can use these tools to really replace the mundane tasks in an organization. But you shouldn't just automate for automation's sake and forget the human element, I think, because it's people where your value-added services are going to come from. People. I mean, when I call a bank and I get a voice machine, it just drives me crazy. I immediately press 0 or 9 to get through to the operator. And so, and that's going to affect my perception of the bank that's delivering me a service. I don't really want to go through that process. And maybe millennials are more comfortable with it than I am as an old man, I don't know. But, essentially you've got to be careful about what you automate. Take away the boring stuff, but keep the value-added stuff. I mean, that's the perspective I put on it, because it's your value-added stuff which is going to add to your competitive difference. What your service you give to your clients, which they'll come back to you for, rather than go somewhere else. I'll just leave it there.
Thank you, Mark. So the next question, I think for Bing, in that context, and I think this was actually a question from Ralph, especially when we look at IT and business, and I think Ralph mentioned that, all of us here are all IT drivers, right? We are all, IT savvy people. We are driving the change in IT. How do we close the gap, right? How do you think we can close the gap between the people in IT and the business users? Right? How do we close this gap?
Well, I think the whole aspects of how people see IT will change and has changed, right? One of the things that people see it as previously, IT operations being a service provider to the business, right? So if somebody press 1 for IT help desk and want somebody to get his notebook corrected, or I can't log in, etc. That's how they see IT, right? As a service provider in-house. More and more today, that concept is changing, right? They see IT today actually leading and driving the business, and more we see both business and IT or technology people in organizations driving the business together, right? So even as Accenture, when we help our clients today, we have changed the approach in terms of how we do systems implementation, right? The whole concept today is very much about collaboration. So instead of having a person coming out and asking, so what is your user requirement, or what is your functional requirement? Today we take people through what we call a design thinking process, where everybody sits together, right? Talk about the problem, collaborate, shoot out ideas, whether it's possible or not, both from IT and business perspective, and come up with a joint solution, I would say. So that way we see actually the so-called systems design changing, right? Designing it for humans first, rather than actually what the system can do and cannot do, right? Which is what was in the past.
So, sorry, just to
Hello?
just to follow up in that question, we have another question. So, how different do you see this in Asia as opposed to kind of global in the global climate, right? Is it very different? Is it same? Is it similar? Or is the buying behavior here, the IT versus business, is it different in overseas or kind of is Asia unique?
Asia, in a sense, I would like to say is still slightly behind the curve, and in some cases, they still, and maybe it's because the way our culture is ran, right? We think that we like to ask and keep someone happy, and that's typically how we see IT operations today still, right? But what we've seen is this new whole generation of what I call the new companies in Asia, the startups, right? The new subsidiaries that are set up to disrupt the economy. These people are actually leading the way. In fact, I think they are even far more advanced than the Western Hemisphere when it comes to actually adoption of this new strategy, right? So we see them, coming to us and say, look, instead of us Accenture providing services to them, how do we actually build a business together? Right? How do we actually go to market together? How do we actually collaborate with them together? And it's more partnerial today. So the ecosystem has changed as well. Right? We don't actually go today to say, okay, let's make you successful, and basically us having to charge you a service. Today, actually, we go to market together with them and say, look, how do we actually be successful jointly?
Thank you. In that line on startups and kind of innovation and that ecosystem, I think the next question for Leon, tell us a little bit more about the challenges when a platform like yours. Do you usually sell to IT? Is it usually sell to the business user? What is that conversation? Is there security that comes up? Are people less receptive to adopting new technologies like yours?
So we started out in 2010, and a lot of our customers were initially in Singapore. But what we found is that even in 2010, the Singapore companies and even the government here in Singapore are quite receptive to technologies like Visual Life. And they're using Visual Life for quite sensitive discussions as well. But yes, we do have our fair share of InfoSec reviews, assessments, and we do this a lot with the banks, the accounting firms, large MNCs. So that's quite common for us. And as a startup, we are limited by our resources as well, right? So it's not like we are a large company and we have a team dedicated to compliance and legal. So the responsibility falls on to me. But the good thing is that these companies that we work with, they are a lot larger than us. They understand what it's like to work with a startup company. So over the years, we've actually gotten better at the compliance, the legal, the privacy, the handling of the data. Even with the upcoming GDPR, we're also assessing how that's going to impact us. And it's going to impact us because we collect personally identifiable information. Companies use us for their internal dialogue. So they talk about things that's not public. So there's a lot of things that we have to handle around the cloud as well. But I wouldn't say it's too challenging. I think we're able to navigate around that.
Okay, and do you think that's because of the nature of the product, and or is it because Singapore as a whole, you think some of these companies are more receptive? And is it IT that you're selling to, or mainly the business units?
So we try to sell to the business units because they see the value. Where we start to get a bit more friction is when we work with IT. So when IT and compliance comes in, then the process, the sales cycle becomes a lot longer. So as much as you can, you try to work with the business units.
Okay.
Yeah.
So next question, I think in the same line for Kevin. I think especially when you are in the education space, you look at a lot of different companies and research, in that field. Where do you think, or what stage would you say Singapore is in terms of, adopting new technologies like cloud apps and automation? And what hurdles are present? What hurdles do you see present today that they need to overcome?
Well, for NUS, like the other universities in Singapore, we are funded by National Research Foundation, which is a forward-looking organization looking at research. Yeah. Forward-looking in the sense that it's beyond the run-of-mill stuff, the ops stuff that SI companies are looking at. We're looking at obviously artificial intelligence in different form. Quite a couple of years ago, that time is all about big data and analytics, right? So now the name AI is more popular, yeah, because it's more intelligent, yeah. So having said that, as a university, we have quite a number of research institutes. The latest that had added on to our bandwagon is Artificial Intelligence Singapore, AI Singapore. Our role is obviously to train more deep tech talents so that we have a pipeline that can feed to the needs of all the commercial entities and even the research organizations. And that's our role as an educational institution. Yeah? And our role also have evolved over time because there's a demand for more commercialization. It's no longer about just finding the best invention, doing a simulation of a scenario and publishing a paper. I think there's a lot more demand for what's next, how is it going to benefit the commercial as well as the community, right? So we see that companies are also talking to us a lot more because they know that we are tuning to this channel of commercialization, of creating relevance to their business. And is there a gap? Yes, obviously, because we famously use technology readiness scale of 1 to 10. Yeah, so we don't bring it all the way in terms of readiness to 10, obviously, because we are not a system integrator organization. We are good in inventions, we are good in finding the best algorithm that will do prediction faster and stuff like that. And we hope to license it at a 6 or 7 to either startups or commercial. There's never an easy handover of a technology to commercial, but we have seen that we do need to fill up that role, a technology translation team role, to make sure that technology can benefit faster.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. So on to budget 2018. I think a lot of you have seen that in this week, especially as Minister Heng Swee Keat announced that on Monday, right? So a lot of emphasis has been placed on the move towards digital economy, and it requires people to build deep capabilities in firms and people, right? So firms and people. So I think the question number one is, especially with all this funding and to help to offset costs, what challenge do you think companies face in adopting digital technology? And this question is for everyone, so opening up to whoever wants to answer that. So what challenge companies face in Singapore in adopting digital technologies?
First stab at that. So it's interesting you said firms and people, because they're two different things, right? So as people, we're carrying around more computing power in our pockets than sent the Apollo 11 to the moon, right? So as people, we're already ahead of the game. We're used to it. We use all these tools every day, Siri, Alexa, Google at home or whatever, So I think the challenge for firms is going to be to keep up with the expectations, especially of the millennials as they come into the workforce. I mean, if you can buy on Amazon and do your banking on your phone, and you come to work and you have to use a 1980s design system to do stuff, you're not going to be able to retain staff right on. So that whole user experience thing is going to be kind of critical. So I think that's a big reason. It's a human reason to embrace technology, just to help you retain people. From my perspective, anyway.
Anyone else want to add to that? Okay.
Yeah, so I think Mark has a good point there, right? And elaborate on that point, I think for us, especially in Accenture, I think what we found is that the organizational structure is actually getting what I call broken down, right? Less hierarchy, more flat. I give you an example. Today when I look at resources to build up my team, right? A lot of them probably are less than 2 or 3 years in the market. They come out from the universities with brilliant, great ideas. They are more agile. They tell you better ideas. than dinosaurs that I have, or like me. So I'm almost like an artificial intelligent robot now because I feed on their ideas, I translate them, I coordinate more, which means I put them in front together in the workshops with our clients. They get impressed. So if you look at it, everything is now going at a huge, tremendous, accelerated path, right? I don't see us taking, 15 years to be at the top of the organization today. And organizations today need to realize that anybody who have ideas that work or can execute the ideas are going to be the leaders of tomorrow, right? And the organizations need to change to actually adapt to that, right? And if you don't, that's when you fail to attract or retain this talent. They'll go somewhere else where they are treasured more. They'll work for someone who believes in their ideas and not someone who just take their ideas, put it in their pocket and I don't know, pay them a couple of dollars, right?
So, show of hands here. How many of you, especially in the topic of people, feel that you are IT savvy? How many of you don't feel that you're IT savvy and you feel that you're living in the... Okay, so I think, more people feel that they're IT savvy. So I think next question is, how can companies, I think in the same line of people, right, developing people, how can companies with older and not very IT savvy employees also participate in the digital economy?
I think the concept of training, right, has changed as well, right? Today, in the past, most organizations think that, we send our guys to a training course, they get enabled, they get dumped with a lot of hands-on experience or workshop experience, for example, like Cooper, etc. What they don't realize is actually what's getting stronger is what we call a peer-to-peer knowledge sharing or training. And what we have started to do and invest is actually do that, right? Where we have weekly stand-up, what I call brown bag sessions, where all the people who are doing their own initiative to learn something share it with the group, right? And that's how we proliferate the knowledge across the team, right? And we run this virtually, right, across ASEAN, right? So that not only do we just share it within Singapore, we share it with Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, and Indonesia. And that's how we are learning as an organization, rather than actually dependent upon what I call structured training.
So one question I think for Leon, right, moving on to Leon, I think in the startup scene, a lot of times it's seen as young people, very IT savvy people working in the, kind of startup environment. Is that true in your company? Or what is the mix between IT versus non-IT savvy people?
Actually, that's a great point, because we've been putting a lot of job ads, interviewing a lot of people, and a lot of people that actually apply for these jobs are pretty young. I think the oldest is probably 35 to 40 years old. We don't actually get older people applying for our jobs. And it's not that the jobs that we are putting out there are very specific to these younger generations. So I'm not sure, but I think going back to the previous question, I feel that it's not so much about whether we're IT savvy or not. I think it's whether we're comfortable with the tools that's now being delivered digitally. And I think that it's actually an enabler for even the older or non-IT savvy people. They're able to focus more on the analysis and not have to deal with the processes, the manual work, and all the processing that a non-digital system might entail. So I think that it's actually an enabler, and for us as a startup company, we're actually quite, I would say, forward-looking in the sense that we're quite accepting of older employees. And we tend not to see people by your age, but really, what's your experience? How relevant is your experience? You can be 45 years old, but you have relevant experience to us. That's the kind of people that you want to bring into the organization. Yeah.
Thank you. I think last question in that same line for Kevin, on the educational scene, do you see a lot of, NUS puts up a lot of, kind of courses, and I think you have, credits from the government to take part in some of these courses as well. Do you see adoption, in more senior employees are taking it up, or is it mainly young professionals?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I can't speak for all the faculties.
Yeah.
The ones I'm familiar with, like for example, the School of Computing and Engineering, as well as NUS ISS, which is next door to us, conducting a lot of master's programs. Do see not just Singaporeans, also the foreign PRs and people who stay in Singapore and work in Singapore, wanting to up their skills, especially analytics, because it's so popular. And like what Leon said, even if they are older, when they come back to the classroom, they do feel the pressure of having to pass exams, but they can actually use their industry experience of the analyzing partner, rather than to have to write codes and see how it runs and whether it compound works or not, etc. So those skill sets that require that sort of hardcore coding, you don't generally see the older meet career people coming back. But I think a combination of business and technical skills are very popular. Yeah, and not just NUS. I think every universities have different kind of practical related learning courses. So that it's not just academia and research, right? They have a chance to even use it as a keystone project in their company, to tell their peers and stuff, hey, I learned something, I can try it out. And I think that's important, to give them a purpose of learning, not just for the sake of another certificate from NUS, right? So I think it has changed.
Thank you, Kevin. So we are at halfway mark. I just want to open up the floor. We still have a lot of questions unanswered in Pigeon Hole. But anyone wants to kind of elaborate on any questions that you've asked that we have not answered? Okay.
I'm gonna bring it. Hi, my name is Tad. I work for Consulting Research Singapore, and what we do is we bring cloud enablement to nonprofits. So nonprofits have users that are not within the company's capabilities, from aunties who, what is this? It's a mouse with a tail, they think it's a real mouse, to young people who are very web savvy. And the reason I came to this seminar is I was looking for a recipe that one of my clients needed. I want to connect someone who needs a service from a VWO, from the web, and get it into a CRM application, Salesforce, and then alert my team, who handles all kinds of different things at different stages of incorporating that constituent who needs help. So I was looking for a recipe. So intelligent automation is key here, and it's very simple. I want to connect the Google form to the CRM that has business rules and data validation that sends out and alerts people to do their tasks. So Mark, human aspect, very important, right? We want to use this technology to hide everything from them. Why? Because we want them to collaborate in a seamless, timely manner. I'd like to know if you have specific instances or use cases where these connectors, these intelligent connectors, help you automate your business. Is that too big?
Well, I can give examples of our clients, maybe, because when you deploy a cloud solution like Cooper or anything else, right? You can't run that standalone. It's always got to be integrated, whether it's simply back to your accounting system or ERP, or whether you're going to pull employee information from your HR system or whatever. I mean, there's always going to be integration involved. So all our projects have got integration of one form or another. And what I've hear you saying is that what you're talking about is a form of integration to push the data that you collect in the Google form back into a CRM system. So I would say 100% of our projects have some sort of integration, whether it's as simple as that or whether it's a bit more complex. It could be cloud-to-cloud integration, or it could be cloud to on-premise integration, or what have you. But I don't know if I'm fully answering your question, but is it possible? Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to hide the complexity? Yes, absolutely. But you would probably need to make use of APIs and some sort of middleware to make it happen. That's all I'm saying.
I think in that line, Leon might want to talk about his experience. So Leon actually is a friend of mine many years back, And he came to me with this problem, right? He needed to sync up his Salesforce, his CRM, and his Zero, right? And then it was middle of the night. Remember, it was 3 a.m. in the morning. He was still working because it's startup life. Everybody works in the middle of the night, And he called me up and he's like, I'm looking at Workato. I know you're working at Workato. Tell me what it is and how it can help me, right? Leon, why don't you think that?
That's a good example.
So as a startup company, right? I mean, we use a ton of tools, and we, even from the early stage, we try not to be tool vendor locked in. So we use a bunch of tools like Salesforce from way back. We use Zero for accounting. We also have our own platform, our SaaS platform, which is what our customers use to create their accounts and set up everything. And in terms of customer data, our source of truth is Salesforce. But Salesforce can't do a lot of things. They can't generate our invoices. They can't log in, how users are interacting with the platform, and so on and so forth. And this doesn't even cover the marketing aspect, like HubSpot or Workato and so on. So we've had this challenge with getting Salesforce and Zero to talk to each other well. So in the past, we used to engage independent consultant to build this integration. That worked well for a couple of years, but then the consultant decided, this is not going to be our primary focus as business, and they move on to full consultancy. So we were left with kind of a product that was no longer being developed or actively improved. And the problem with this kind of integration is that if you build it too tightly, for example, if with this vendor we had to get our developers to actually connect our systems together, that affected our agility to respond to changing business requirements. As a startup, it's really important. Like for example, when you realize that competitors are coming out with a different pricing model, a different business model, you need to change the way you sell your product. And sometimes you don't want to be held back by these kind of processes internally. So that's where I started to look at tools like Workato to see how we can take away the business logic that we built into our platforms in code and transition it to some place else like Workato, where we can, on the fly, just make changes in a couple of hours. And any cost savings is huge because we no longer have to put in engineering hours to get it done. And then all the teams and everyone in the company gets the relevant information in real time.
So I think the next question up there is, many company tracks only direct costs, and pushing the cost down, they often increase the cost in other parts of the organization that they are not tracking, right? So I think in your experience, Leon, in that same line, is that the case? Are you pushing up costs in other areas when you're doing some of these IT operations? Because I know you built a number of recipes on your own.
Yeah.
Right? You have experience doing that. So what are some of the costs and how you're managing that?
We spend a lot of money on software. I think as a SaaS company, I also believe in subscribing to this kind of online digital services to improve our productivity. But I also take it as a point that if you don't pay for these services, we're going to incur costs in other manual work, less productivity, issues between the business and the marketing team. So we kind of use all these services to remove all these manual processes and automate it all. So they don't have to think about all these manual interventions. So we save a lot of money on manpower and all this time.
And it's also on reducing errors, right?
Yes,
because some of these errors can be costly as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So like for example, when the salesperson closes a deal and they want to send an invoice or quotation to the customer, if we didn't have a tool like Workato or Salesforce to integrate this with our Zero platform, then you have to go through a lot of different steps, and a lot of things could go wrong in that process. Sometimes you set out certain rules, certain processes that you want them to follow, and sometimes it's difficult to keep them to it. So right now they just press one button, they get the invoice generated right away.
Anyone has anything else to add there? Ving?
Yeah, I think when you look at cost, there is also an inherent missing part that a lot of people don't catch, which is actually the cost of what I call human turnover. And it goes back to, I think, some of the challenges that non-profit organizations have, because the volunteers come in and come out every single day, and if you don't actually put it into what you call a recipe, right, then the cost of actually investing, or the upfront investment cost of each individual that comes in.
Well, I think you hit on a point that, especially in Singapore, the turnover rate for SSOs, the turnover rates for SSOs are very high. I embarked on a project with some large foundation and tried to help the preschools. And we tried to make it as simple as possible. But so many people left their jobs because they did not want to engage in technology. And since then, I've been very aware of the cost of turnover, because that's a showstopper, right? You get no collaboration, you get no teamwork, you get nothing.
Yeah, and those costs don't show up on the balance sheet.
If you can't measure it, how can you manage it?
Exactly, right. And that's why, if you look at one of the things that you will find with a lot of the things that we are looking at today is really from a human design perspective. A lot of systems today are there, like it or not, we say, let's adopt it out the box. But out the box have got a couple of inherent assumptions that these people are competent enough to do that. What you will find that is not the case with the workforce or the users of the solution. And because of this whole digital transformation or this digitalization, anybody out there is going to be able to use that system. So when you think about it, a lot of people don't or forget about the fact that you need to invest to think about a design for the human, right? And that is actually an upfront investment that's worth investing in, because the rewards of that is, like you say, right? If I build an engaging solution that helps everybody to maintain its affection to the organization or its work, it means a lot to them, right? And that's a difficult cost to measure.
Since you brought that up, I'm going to follow that up with what Leon said. What Leon said about that integration that you custom build, that you're not, the vendor, you're locked in, and you build your own recipes, right? And you said basically one size does not fit all. Now, the recent thing that Workato did that's earth-shattering, I mean, fundamental, is this whole GitHub technology of sharing code, because now your touch points with Salesforce is going to vary from client to client. But if you can share that and it's open source and I can develop on that, that's a huge game changer. Now you can really scale up the community and benefits to organizations. I mean, Mark, in your sphere, there's all kinds of applications. People use different, accounting tools, right? They may not use the entire suite of Coupa products. They may have some other third party, but still they want to integrate to get the collaboration. But everyone's touch point's going to be different. So I think Workato has this pretty cool concept with the recipe sharing on GitHub that you guys should be talking a lot more about.
Thank you. Yeah. And if I can add on to that, I mean, first of all, anyone who's interested in managing costs better come and talk to Coupa, because that's what we're doing. But this whole idea that you touched on of community intelligence, I mean, I really think that's where this business is going, this cloud business. I mean, if I look at companies, take Coupa as an example, we're managing data for a lot of organizations, right? Imagine if we could sort of analyze that data and make community intelligence about supplier performances, supplier risk, or make that data and share it through the community, or provide benchmarks that will allow you to benchmark yourself against best-in-class performance. That's valuable information. And I think that's where ultimately this cloud business is going to develop and go, sharing community intelligence, just like that GitHub example you were using.
So we have one question up on the wall. So I think this is for you, Mark. So how do you identify that Workato would be a good fit for digital transformation?
It's a very specific question. I mean, it's a very simple value proposition for me. I mean, everything that we do requires our clients to integrate to something else. So Workato just helps bridge that gap. And that's essentially the value for us.
And I think being you came, I think when we spoke, a couple of months back, I think we immediately saw that value. So what did you see, right? How could it help IT operations, DevOps, and why would someone, I consider a platform like Workato?
I think it helps them to implement with speed. A lot of people come to us and say, I can't wait 2 months. I need this in a month. I need it in 2 days, right? When you have a repository of something that you can plug and reuse, or change a bit and reuse it for your own business, it helps. So that's what we're doing, right? And one of the things that, real life scenarios that we're seeing today is tremendous operation challenges for contact centers, especially in banks, where they have a series of AS400 green screens still being maintained today, right? How do you integrate to them, right, and make it a seamless experience for the contact center agents, right? And back to the point about humans being retrained every day at contact centers, where we see is that if you actually already have set recipes to go back and talk to AS400s tomorrow, that's really done, right? So if you can use that, change it, deploy it quickly for each different organizations, you will seriously accelerate the time to deploy a new application.
Thank you. Before I go to Kelvin, I have last question for you, Ling. So do you see banks adopting cloud and DevOps operating models? This is the next question. I think has lots of votes. So
Yeah,
banks and cloud.
Firstly, I guess we've seen quite a number of banks, not in this country, actually in Thailand, right? I think there's already about 6 or 7 banks in Thailand using Salesforce as the CXE or customer experience platform, right? And increasingly, you'll see organizations here in Singapore as well exploring that. We've seen as well insurance companies embarking on it, right? So to the question as in, are they going to cloud? The answer is yes. Are they going there fast enough? Maybe not yet, but we see that S-curve coming really, really soon. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, next question for Kevin, right? And this is on artificial intelligence, right? There are a couple of questions around that, and machine learning. It's not on the wall. I have it here with me. So AI and ML. So how do someone apply AI and ML, in modern IT operations, right? What should they be thinking about? Are there tools out there that can help them? What are some of the things that you have done in NUS that have pushed the boundaries on that?
Okay, so like I mentioned, we have a new institute called the AI Singapore Institute, just launched last year in InnoFest somewhere in May. We are still training a lot of researchers and PhDs to do really deep tech AI. AI is also very commonly used in many other commercial settings where, as long as you can identify some patterns, and tell you, okay, maybe this X-ray film and that, what's the difference, because it shows some nuances of visual differences, and then can tell you that because of that, this person has a certain diagnosis. The radiographer wouldn't have to eyeball that X-ray films. So that's AI. In some ways it's true, but what I'm trying to say is also that AI requires a little more than just the simple pattern recognition. A true AI should be able to also diagnose, predict, and give recommendation. And I think that's sort of lacking in most definition of AI. So what we are doing in NUS is to collaborate with a lot of top other researchers from Tsinghua in China, because in China they have a lot of data sets, and that's very important, right? I mean, you can say you want to do AI, but then your data are all in paper and pen, right? So there's still a process of digitizing it. So that part is important, collection or digitizing data. Then you have something to talk about. So we are doing as much with Tsinghua, Zhejiang, even Japanese universities that has data sets for aging cohorts, etc. Healthcare is one big user of AI, yeah, definitely, because there's a crunch in labor. Banks and blockchains and all this stuff, they have a lot of data as well. They need fast decision to make monetizing related recommendation for our clients and their own businesses. So where data is so critical, they will need good AI, and I think we need people who are willing to do all this hard work of learning AI also. Can just talk AI. You gotta really roll out your sleeves and want to understand how to do the real stuff. So that's what we are doing.
So I think open to the floor, in your companies, or if you've seen other companies, so what specific first steps can business take action on, to transform digitally, especially in leveraging AI, automation, bots, machine learning and things like that. What can they do, right? What first steps can they take?
I mean, one of the things we've been doing with our clients is we've developed deep machine learning, recursive neural network algorithm, which enables our customers to basically feed in raw data about their spending patterns around the world, different currencies, different languages, different ERP systems, etc., to really give an accurate classification of what that spend was about. I mean, simple example, what am I spending on PCs around the world, or laptops? Now, that might be a very innocuous question to ask, but the fact of the matter is that they code things up in different ways, and there isn't really a very easy identifiable thing to actually tell you that this purchase on this asset code from that supplier was actually a PC or a service or whatever it happened to be, right? So, we need to give them that visibility. So rather than having like rules-based algorithms which aren't very accurate, using an AI algorithm, and by deep machine learning, I'm talking about something that learns as it goes along. So every time it sees something new, it learns from that and incorporates it into its knowledge base, so that next time it sees it, it can also make that prediction. So we feed that raw data in to give them a very accurate picture of their spending patterns, so they can identify opportunities for savings and compliance improvements, risk mitigation, that sort of stuff. So that's a sort of simple kind of service which organisations can take advantage out of the box and actually get a result within weeks. So I mean, come and talk to me afterwards if you're interested.
Anyone else have anything to add there? What first steps? Yeah.
I think in terms of IT Ops, because there's a lot of noise. If you have a lot of monitoring agents running, so we're also looking at see how we can identify which are the more important alerts to respond to. Definitely do not want to have alert fatigue. The other thing is that we also have intrusion, some kind of intrusion detection system. So that kind of looks at our baseline activity and then alerts us when there's an anomaly. So that's what we do internally.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Is it reasonable?
I don't think you need that.
No. Yeah. Is it reasonable for small companies with little IT assets or resources to jump right into AI without having to get into business intelligence initially?
That's a good question.
I mean, the barrier to entry to AI is quite steep, whereas BI is relatively low. Is it?
Yeah, it's a great question, but I think if you're in the healthcare industry, for example, then going to AI directly is better, because you can use AI as a source of a second opinion, for example, rather than go out there
but
for
I'm saying
diagnostics.
smaller companies, not the.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things the Singapore government has been pushing for is data.gov, right? Trying to publish some of this data out there so that people like us, small startup company, can utilize some of this data. I think small companies can look at some of this government published data, because I think internally we don't have, if you're a small company, you don't have that many data to start with, right? So it will be good to start looking at data sets outside your companies, and I think in small companies we are always looking for new products that we can kind of monetize on, and looking at some of the available data sets out there, and you'll be surprised actually how much data there is out there that is publicly available.
So you're saying unless I have a sufficient sample size, I can't leverage AI?
What do you all think?
I think that is true, right? Because but it also depends on the context that you're using the AI for, right? For example, I think if you're dealing with somebody, a decision, right? like a health recommendation or a diagnosis, I think the vast amount of data helps to provide a better prediction. But if you're looking at AI for, let's say, a website to be able to display the content, more personalized to that person's clicks, I don't think you need a big sample size. So if you think about, back to your question as in, does the size of the organization equip you to decide whether you should use AI more or BI more? I think it actually depends on what the company or the business is in, right? And if the business, you can be a very small startup looking at what I call genetic science, right? Now, if you have data, a large vast of data in the genetic science, then you can use AI immediately, right? It doesn't matter if you're a 5-man company or a 2-man company, right? I think it depends on the sample, right? Because at the end of the day, the results, the confidence of the results is something that is important, right?
Thank you. Last question before we end off today. I think this one has one of the highest votes as well. Does automation and integration projects have to be large? What is the timeline like? Can non-IT users drive this, and how? It's open to anyone who wants to answer that.
I can answer that.
Go ahead.
First of all, they don't have to be large. They can be very small, like my point solution. It can be done with the right recipe or the right connector in about, and assuming you have to learn everything, how to design forms and everything, you can probably do it in 1 hour.
1 hour.
I did it in less.
Okay, so the answer is 1 hour. You can do integration projects and start small. I think a lot of times we see that a lot with customers at Workato. A lot of times you think of, this big transformation project, but where the rubber meets the road is really starting on one single point project to prove the use case out, and then start growing from there. And I think one of the things that we at Workato tries to do is to make it easy for fast iteration without having to be focused on the technology, but focus on the business process side of things.
And there's a second part. How do you do it?
Yeah.
So it's very simple. You identify the people. Then you identify the data touch points for interoperability. You build it. You have the same data types. Then you just turn it on, and it syncs up, and then you evaluate it, and you fine tune it. You get that one recipe, then you move on to the next dish.
So people, you find the people, you find the data
who's going to
sets.
use it?
Yeah.
What do they want to see? Because people want to see different things, right? But when you do the integration, you try to pass all the data, so you don't have to pass it differently. And in the presentation, you display only for those people who need to see that set of data. But you have all the data, and you can present it to different people as a whole or in segments.
Thank you, Ted.
Maybe I can add on. I think especially for non-IT, a lot of the integrations actually don't require you to have intricate knowledge of the individual systems.
Right.
So you just point and click. The most you have to do is put in your login and password to authenticate access. So it's really, really easy. My recommendation is to start with something small, very simple, and then move on from there.
So if you want to know more about Workato, go to the back later at the end of the sessions, and we have people here. Our office is just downstairs at 0101. When you come in the car park, you can see it very clearly. Feel free to reach out to any one of our team members if you want to learn more. All right, with that, I want to present a couple of gifts to our panelists today. Can we give them a round of applause?